Coucou, aujourd'hui, nous avons une révision des verbes au passé composé. So we know that the passé composé is one of many past tenses in French. Last year we talked about the passé composé in comparison to the imparfait. We will look at that also again this year. And we also mentioned the passé composé when we learned the plusquamparfait to talk about one action being in the past, the passé composé, and the plusquamparfait being an action that was even further in the past. We will see all of these tenses again this chapter. Passé composé, we know, is for an event that has already happened, an event that you can count the number of times that it has occurred. This is in contraction with the imparfait, where we will see later we use in other situations in the past. There are always two parts to forming the passé composé. First, you need your helping verb. There are only two choices, avoir or être. So every verb in the passé composé always starts with j'ai or je suis, nous avons or nous sommes, plus the participle, which is going to be the second half. ER verbs, the participle becomes E with the accent aigu. IR verbs end with I, and RE verbs end with U. There are some exceptions, but this is the rule in general. So since most of verbs in French will use avoir as their helping verb, here we have the conjugations for avoir in the present tense. This is how we start the passé composé. J'ai plus whatever the past participle is. Tu as plus whatever the past participle is. There are several verbs and reflexive verbs that will take être as their helping verb in the passé composé. So here is être in the present tense because this is the tense that you conjugate être in order to have it be the helping verb in the passé composé. Now the verbs that take être are the Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp verbs. We have those here. Reading down the list, we have to go down, to re-enter or come back, to go up, to return, to go out, and like to go out with friends, to come, to arrive, to be born, to become, to enter, to come back, to fall, to stay, to go, to die, to pass, and to leave. Now, some of these verbs you see have little asterisks next to them, and that's because while most of the time they are Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp verbs, which means that they need être as their helping verb in the passé composé, there do exist situations where they can have avoir as their helping verb in the passé composé. So if I say je suis sorti, I left, Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp verb. J'ai sorti mon stylo, to mean I took out my pen, then we have it as a regular verb in the passé composé that would take avoir. He went down the stairs. Il est descendu. Il a descendu l'escalier. Now that we have the object escalier there, we actually change it from a Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp verb to a verb that takes avoir as the helping verb. We should know that in the passé composé, verbs that take être as their helping verb also have agreement. So we see in the sentence ma mère est partie, we added an E to partie. Mes sœurs sont sorties, we added ES because it's feminine and plural. And when we have any verb in the passé composé, whether it takes avoir or être, in the negative, we're going to put the negative expression, the ne pas, typically around the helping verb. So, il n'a pas fait. Il n'est jamais. Of course, there are some exceptions to this rule, such as when we say ne personne, no one, ne ni, so neither nor, ne aucun, not any, and ne nulle part, which is nowhere. Here are some verbs that we see often, some common verbs that have irregular past participles in the passé composé. So, être, to be, if you want to say I was or I have been, j'ai été. So you still have the subject, the je, the tu, whatever it might be. All of these verbs take avoir as their helping verb, and then what we're going over on this page is the second half of that verb in the passé composé. So not just je fais, but j'ai fait, as I did. J'ai eu, I had. J'ai bu, I drank. J'ai dû, I should have. I needed to. Falloir is the infinitive form of il faut. Il a fallu, it was necessary. J'ai lu, I read. Here are some other irregular past participles. Pouvoir, to reign. Pouvoir, to be able to. Recevoir, to receive. Connaître, to be familiar with people or places. Savoir, to know information. Voir, to see. Vouloir, to want. Venir, to come. Sourire, to smile. And suivre, which is to follow someone, or you can use it to say to take like a class or a course. Mettre, to put. Promettre is to promise. Permettre is to permit or allow. Prendre, which is to take. Comprendre, to understand. Apprendre, to learn. All of these are ending in is, me, promis, permis. So j'ai permis, j'ai compris. Nous avons appris. Same thing, to write and to say. So all of these on this page rhyme. They're similar in that sense. And then we have to discover. So j'ai découvert, I discovered. To offer, to open, to suffer, and to cover. So again, to reiterate, if we were taking the verb parler, to talk, and putting it in the past, j'ai parlé. You need all of these parts in order for this to be correctly conjugated. If you drop the helping verb, what you're writing doesn't make sense. Regular IR verb, finir, j'ai fini. Regular RE verb, vendre, to sell, j'ai vendu, I sold. Here is an example of the verb aller, which is in the Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp family. Je suis allé, nous sommes allés. We have the e's in parentheses to show that we could be talking about somebody who's feminine. And we have the s's to show that these can be plural. You know, vous can be you formal or it can be a group of you. So we're noticing the agreement that's occurring here only because it's a Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp verb. Same thing with these reflexive verbs. So now for the reflexive verbs, we need to remember to include the me, te, se. We need to remember to use être as our helping verb. And we need to remember to make agreement when necessary. And then finally, just a note on the verb mourir, which is to die. Mourir is interesting because the past participle acts as a verb and it can also act as an adjective. In the sentence, say grands-parents sont morts, his grandparents are dead. We're literally translating word for word, but it can also mean his grandparents died. So often there's not a huge difference in either form, but depending on the context of the sentence, it might give a slightly different meaning. There you have it. There is a review of how to form the passé composé. We will practice in class with how to use it in the context in different sentences in the past. But if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. À demain!